goes back to poverty, helping folks get some skills so they can get a job. It doesn't have to be the last job they ever have, but get in the workforce and start being able to provide for yourself and your family if you have one, and try to break that cycle.
You're listening to Find the Good News, episode 123, The Right Chemistry, a good conversation featuring George Swift, CEO and President of the Southwest Louisiana Economic Development Alliance. Find the Good News is produced by Parker Brand Creative Services, a branding agency that thinks sideways, pushes forward, and gets your brand up. See what else we do at parkerbrandup.com. More often than not, people are putting on some type of front. If one looks and listens with intent, a little patience, and repetition, they might catch a glimpse of the real person behind the curtain. Finding someone that knows how to be truly honest, someone that is settled into their own skin, that's a real gift. When I first encountered my guest at a business luncheon almost 20 years ago, I knew I'd met one of these special people. It was refreshing to say the least, and I've left every meeting with him since with the same general afterthought. I really like this guy. For over 20 years, George Swift, the CEO and President of the Southwest Louisiana Economic Development Alliance, has been using his unique chemistry of professional skills and personal strengths in service to the Southwest Louisiana region. Recently, George announced that he was stepping down from this critical leadership role with the Alliance. Soon, he'll be stepping up to the next chapter in his personal and professional life, and whoever is selected for the position will be standing on a foundation George Swift helped build. After picking up bits and pieces of stories over the years, I finally had the honor to sit down and have George share the steps on his path from Selma, Alabama to Lake Charles, Louisiana. George Swift means a lot to me personally and professionally. He's been honest and direct, while always being respectful and kind. That's a kind of strength that I appreciate. I invite you to meet a man that has a passion for professional betterment, personal growth, enduring change, and the ability of human hearts to rise up from poverty and adversity in an endeavor to make the world a better place, starting right here at home. Now, let's press play on a little good news.
Wake up, it's morning, dreaming up a story. I can hear the way it's going, 'cause you're laughing in your sleep. On the path to deliverance in a holy wall of light, pouring through your window.
Old news, bad news, fake news. Sometimes you want to shut those channels down and seek a better source. With Find the Good News, I tune into good people doing good works wherever I can find them. I scan the signals looking for educators and students, scientists and spiritual leaders, writers, musicians and artists, business owners, volunteers, and active citizens who offer their time, resources, and talents to build a better world for others. In each episode, I tune into the hearts and minds of my extraordinary guests. I uncover the critical life experiences that shape them, the principles that guide them, and the foundational philosophies that keep them on their path of goodness. There's a lot of news, and it's a noisy world. My name is Oran Parker, and I'm cutting through the static to find the good.
And I love you just as well.
So I don't know what the first project was that we actually worked on together, but I don't know, some kind of a relationship built over the years, professional, and for me it was always a little bit personal too, and I maybe peeling the curtain back, but I just always enjoyed coming to meetings with you because there aren't many meetings I enjoy. I mean, I don't know who loves meetings, but I always do.
My wife says I've never met a meeting I didn't like. Okay, I like a lot of meetings. Okay.
Do you enjoy meetings?
I guess that's where you get more things done.
Yeah.
If you get people together and, you can waste a lot of time, but if you have a goal to get something out of it, action item, then you can move ahead. But many of them are not that productive. But that's what we do, is meet with a lot of different people, different prospects that are looking to come to the area and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's a real skill, right? I mean, that's something that I find just having been in a lot of meetings. I'm action-oriented, too. I'm always looking in a meeting, my mind goes into, okay, what's an actionable item? Because you go to a meeting and you leave. I'm sure you've been to them where you go, did we accomplish anything?
Yep.
Is there anything anybody's doing? Who's
I've
doing
done
it?
thousands of those. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm always staring into that static and going, what is something I can take away and go right back to work and start doing, at least moving it forward. And, that trying to build that momentum. And you always struck me as somebody that liked that too. And so I always told my wife, George is one of the few people I meet with who's honest with me. I feel like you just get right to the point and you'll just tell me how it is. And I feel like that's a rare thing. A lot of people put up and we all do, I think, put up a sort of a veneer or a paint job, but you'll just tell me what's going on and what needs to happen and the truth of it, and I appreciate that.
And usually with a short deadline. Okay.
Right.
I have been known to wait till the last minute to get things done.
Well, I'm sure if it's like the industry, I always tell people this. I say, hey, you're not the Lone Ranger. I think everybody operates like that.
You have to move quick. When there's an opportunity, you got to do it, and that's just. Flexibility is the key. You got to be flexible in business, and you got to act when it's before you. And I have had literally hundreds of missed opportunities because I waited for something through the years,
Sure.
Or I said, well, I'll do that next year, and all kind of things happen.
Yeah. So if we could rewind for a minute, this is what I've picked pieces up over the years in various conversations we've had, but what's your career path that leads you here? And then I know you have some changes coming. What brings you here?
Well, I'm from a small town that's very well known, Selma, Alabama, civil rights capital, but it's also in the Civil War, it was a Confederate arsenal. And at the time before the Civil War, Selma and Atlanta were the same size. But during the Civil War, the town was basically burned down, and they never recovered. Atlanta, by the way, has done pretty good, if you've noticed. Okay,
right.
A lot of difference. Then we had in 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King came to Selma because the Civil Rights Act had passed in 1964, but black folks could not vote. So it wasn't working out. So they came in Dallas County, Alabama, where Selma's, not Dallas, Texas, but Dallas County, Alabama, had about 30,000 people in it, and about 60% were black folks, and only about 300 could vote, and they were pastors and school teachers. And so there was a sheriff there, Jim Clark, who wore a military helmet and carried a billy club and was a hothead, and you couldn't write a script like where could we go to get a negative reaction and get this brought to the public nationally. So Dr. King came to Selma. They had protest marches. The marchers, not the one over the bridge, but just going to register to vote, they were beaten and put in jail and all of that. And so then they had the Selma to Montgomery March on March 7th, 1965. I'll never forget it. I was in high school then. And I was at the radio station pretending to be a disc jockey and a news reporter. But anyway, the first march is when you've seen it on national news over and over, where the marchers got to the top of the bridge, and then the state troopers advanced on them and beat the hell out of them and tear gassed them. And future Congressman John Lewis was beaten, and at the time he was about 25, 26 years old. And Martin Luther King was not in the first march. He was in Atlanta. And so John Lewis led the march, got the brunt of the beating. So I'm giving all that. I got into the news angle. I love that because we had all the national networks come to Selma, and they were looking for somebody local to take them around to interview different people.
Yeah.
And so I got involved in that, and then I started hanging out at the radio station when I was about 13, and finally one day when I was 14. The owner of the station said, "Hey, can you work Sunday morning?" And I said, "Me?" And he said, "Yeah, you know how to do everything. You've been hanging around here."
Right.
So I got on the air, and I thought I was going to pass out the first time I did a station break. And I was so nervous, but got over that. But I enjoyed that. And through the years, I in Selma was on the air, but then got into sales and management. And then the company that owned the station in Selma bought the radio station that at the time was LA 99 in Lake Charles.
Okay.
And I was the regional manager, and they had stations in Mississippi and Georgia, and I was doing a lot of traveling. And so the manager of LA 99 left and went to Jacksonville, Florida. Les Samuels, his family owned the station. And so the president of the company said, "Who are you going to get for Lake Charles?" And I said, "Well, to tell you the truth, I'd like to do it." Because when I started coming here, and I think it was the food,
Really?
the food got me, and then the music, the Cajun music,
Okay.
and I just loved it. And Lake Charles was about 3 times larger than Selma, so I thought I was moving to the big city.
Sure.
And so we moved here in 1987, and one of the things I did is I was always involved in the Chamber of Commerce. I was elected in the city council in Selma for 2 terms. And I found out running for office is very good, and you have a lot of questions. You don't always have the answers when you get in office, but you try. But anyway, so when we moved here, I got involved in the chamber. I later was on the Chenault board, and I'd always worked in chamber and things like that. And so in 1997, I was chair of the board of the chamber. And then after that, the radio stations were sold, and the mayor of Lake Charles at the time, Randy Roach, had been talking to the elected officials in the 5 parishes about working together. He went to Washington to some seminar about regionalism, and we were not very regional at the time. And so he got the elected officials together, and they were wondering, well, what is he up to? Is he trying to take over our government or what?
Yeah.
But finally they figured out that, hey, this is a good idea. We need to work together. And so Alan Beauregard, Calcasieu Cameron, and Jeff Davis came together, and the elected officials formed the Southwest Louisiana Partnership. And they hired somebody to run that, and that was me. And so we started in 2004 with the partnership. And in 2005, we had Hurricane Rita hit. Well, at that time, everything's off the table. We had to shift in the recovery mode. And the parish, Calcasieu Parish, asked me to help lead the public meetings that we had that were required by FEMA to see what could be done to make the area more sustainable for the future. And one of the things that came out of it, with a little prompting, was that we needed a business incubator. We were the last major city in Louisiana that did not have a business incubator, which is a place where startup companies can go. They don't have enough money to get commercial office space, and they have an idea, but they need help getting going. And so that's what we started, the business incubator. And they had some office space in the Magnolia building that then Parish Administrator Mark McMurray was supportive of it, and we had 3 or 4 offices there just to kind of try it out to see if it would work, and it did. And so after the hurricanes of Rita, there was money available for recovery. And so the parish government and the city and the chamber, we sold our building, Pujo Street, and it all went toward the Seed Center, and McNeese State University owned the property.
I see.
And so the Seed Center was a joint collaborative effort, public and private. And then we were a little short on money, like about $4 or $5 million, and so we got a grant from the U.S. Department of Commerce, EDA. And so when the building was built and we opened it in 2013, it was paid for. And it's a 52,000 square foot building that cost about $13 million, which now would probably cost $35 million or $30 million. But in the 10 and almost 11 years that we've been in here, it's been greatly used as a one-stop economic development center. We have meeting and conference rooms. We have other entities here, such as the McNeese Small Business Development Center, the incubator, and then our offices of the Chamber, Economic Development Alliance, and the Regional Planning Commission are here. And in January of this year, the president of McNeese at the time, Dr. Darrell Burkell, moved his office here along with the provost and the administrative finance office on the first floor. McNeese had a couple of offices down there that were not greatly used, and the building where the president was on the campus is going to be utilized for the College of Education. And because they're tearing down one building and utilizing that space. So now we have the president's office in addition to everything else here at the Seed Center. So we had the partnership going, and the Chamber had hired a new CEO, Donna Atkinson, and Donna had some health issues, even though she was a young lady, and she left after about a year. And I was asked to come run the Chamber, and I said, well, I really want to see if I can get this regional thing going. And they said, well, can you put it together with the Chamber? And I said, yeah, that's what should have been done to begin with. So we took about 6 months. We had focus groups with all the boards and everything, and excuse me, elected officials. And in 2006, we came together as the Southwest Louisiana Economic Development Alliance, which is a chamber and the foundation and the partnership. We have since merged the partnership into the foundation. We have public and private representation there. And so I kind of backed into the job, starting out as a volunteer, having a passion for economic development, and kind of moved in that direction.
Very interesting. I mean, you know, that was something, as I'm listening to you tell that story, and what you ended with that really well. You know, you said you had a passion for economic development. Where do you think that came from? I mean, you know, you tell that story where you're at the radio station in Selma. I mean, do you feel like some of the roots for that passion for economic development are in that?
Well, my father was an entrepreneur. He loved to open up businesses, did not like to run businesses, but he came up with a toy store in my hometown. It was kind of like Toys R Us. He came up with that. Then he came up with the sports center, which was boats and fishing tackle and all that, kind of a bass pro shop. Very small, but he had the concept. And then some restaurants and things like that. And he would love to get them started, but then he would turn it over to somebody else, and sometimes they forgot to turn in the money and that kind of stuff. But his passion was starting businesses and coming up with ideas. And he, after he left our family drugstore, went to work for the Chamber of Commerce in Selma, and he ran that for 10 years.
Interesting.
And so I think I just kind of grew up doing that, and being around economic development and being on the city council in Selma. I was exposed to, you know, working economic development projects, and they had an air base that had been closed, Craig Air Force Base, and it's kind of like Chenault here had been closed and turned into an economic development park. So I guess I kind of just grew up in that atmosphere. Plus, I was always in sales in the radio broadcasting business, and you just kind of look for opportunities and new businesses coming in, and trying to help businesses with their advertising, and so it kind of fits together. And the Chamber I always said running a radio station is kind of like the chamber, because in radio you had events, and we have events at the chamber, and we have a public policy. We had to deal with the FCC in radio, and now you're dealing with state and federal government on public policy issues. And there's a lot of similarities. Sales and collection, you got to have members and investors to pay the bills so you can do things that you need to do, and that's the same way at the radio station. So a lot of similarities. It was good training, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you tell that. I mean, I'm reading this book right now about that very thing, how these little, he calls them contingent events, and they can be very small, and you don't realize when they're happening that they're actually changing the future for you and other people completely. And, hearing you talk about that, just what you said about the Air Force base or the military base and that property, I see y'all doing that all the time, looking for property or taking an existing property and trying to repurpose it and pitch it and find out what else can it be used for, and keeping the economic wheels moving in that regard. When you hear a story like that, you go, wow, all of your experiences really made you into the perfect person to do the job.
I don't know about that, but it does give you context. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty fascinating. I mean, I didn't realize that you had started at the radio station that young. I've heard you mention it a few times that you were a radio man. You've said that a few times, and I'm like, what does he mean by that? I didn't really know the story.
Well, I was so bad on the air. I don't know why they didn't fire me. And I had a bad habit of getting broken up, started laughing.
Yeah.
And, of course, you've seen these things where people come in the control room and set the copy that you're reading on fire. And, I mean, all that stuff happened. And, people do things to get you broken up. But the worst thing that ever happened, and again, I was about 15 years old, we had a 15-minute news block at the end of the day on radio. National news, state news, sports, weather. Well, about 2 minutes into it, something got me to laughing. I laughed through the whole 15 minutes. And the owner came in after it was over and looked at me, and he said, "If you ever do that again, you're fired." Well, that just made it worse. It's like, I'll never be able to do this again.
Right. It's in the back of your head.
But he didn't fire me. But why? But young folks today don't have the opportunity to get on the air and mess up and be real bad and learn, because everything's digital. So
sure.
They can do things with a computer or their cell phone. They can make movies and do digital stuff and record all this things that was unheard of then. We
Right.
had to do it live, or we had a few ads on tape, but a lot of the copy was live. And, so I was very bad on the air, but I was on the air in my hometown, and people accepted it. And I did a telephone talk show at one point.
Wow.
And that was one of those things where in the small town, you kind of knew everybody when they called in.
Oh, you could recognize the voice.
Recognize them, and,
right.
and you had a lot of chronic callers, and so we had a lot of fun with that.
It sounds like fun. Like, actually, I've always thought that is something I would have enjoyed. And, I feel like, true, you just said that about young people and what they're experiencing. I think about those things all the time. Things have changed, and the pace has increased, and the technology has changed so much. I mean, even what you and I are doing today, I mean, it may feel live to somebody listening it because it's casual, but it's not. We can always go back and take something out, take some kind of gaffe out, or if we misspeak, it's possible to do that. But that communicating live and in the moment, and it gets back to what you were talking about meetings and having to take so many meetings and doing it over and over. I've kind of watched in being in meetings over the years that communication is such a important skill, and I think it is kind of changing. We're getting into sort of a reduced quicker text mode almost, like a quick post or a quick quip. I personally like to break things down and share clear, concise. I mean, you probably get those long emails from me where it's like, okay, I've got everything highlighted and bullet pointed, but that's the kind of communication that I appreciate, because it's like, it's almost dying. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like I get emails that are just these little short, no context things, and you go,
what do they really mean?
What do they really mean? And then it requires another communication, and then you go back and forth, and you go, what if we could slow it down just a little bit? And I find in meetings it's very similar, and it's always refreshing when there's just a good communicator in there. And that's not something, some people have a knack for it, but it almost sounds like you may have a knack for it, but it comes with experience. I mean, you just did it almost from the jump. I mean, if you were on the air at 15 years old taking calls.
Well, I was older when I did the talk show.
Okay.
Yeah, that was
but still
later. But you have to, and we covered a lot of live events, and you have to react quickly. Sometimes you do better than others, but we had some major fires in downtown Selma. We covered that. The day that I was on the air one afternoon about 2 o'clock, and about 10 minutes till 2, and we were a CBS radio affiliate. In those days, they had a unit called Net Alert, and they would send signals out, and one would be a news bulletin or different things, So it went off, news bulletin, go live. So we went live on to the network, and Governor George Wallace, who was running for president, he was the governor of Alabama. He was running for president. He was in Maryland at a shopping center, and he was shot. And one of my good friends was traveling with him. He was emceeing the rallies and all that kind of stuff. And so this is like 10 till 2. And then the news comes on. They had an hourly newscast at 2 o'clock. Well, I called the police department in Silver Springs, Maryland, asked them where they had taken Governor Wallace, and they told me the hospital. I called the hospital and asked them to page my friend George Mangum. And damn if he didn't pick up.
Really?
And he was crying, and I got to crying, and we got on the air, and he told what happened and everything. Wow. And then everybody started calling nationwide. I mean, I could never get through again, but for about 10 minutes I had him live, and I looked over there when I got through, and I had forgotten to record it.
Wow.
And those kind of things happen.
Yeah.
And then, so, you got to act quick, but there's so many times that I've missed opportunities by thinking, well, I'll wait till Monday and get with so-and-so, and they die over the weekend, or things like, I've had things like that many times, or folks get sick, or they sell the business, or they change it, whatever the deal is. One lesson I've learned the hard way is to seize the moment, act on the opportunity now. Yeah. Don't wait.
Need a brand boost? Parker Brand Creative Services is your go-to team. From graphic design to video production, we craft your vision with precision. Visit parkerbrandup.com and let's build a great brand together.
Letting people know that they matter to you is so important. And that has happened to me being in business. We've been in business 11 years. I'll be 12 soon. And you work with teams, and I'm sure you've experienced this. You get to where you spend more time with them than sometimes you do with your own family. Mm-hmm. For me, getting back to meetings, we're taking meetings with teams that we're plugged into all the time. That's my job. And if you work with a team long enough, you start to really develop feelings for some of those people. And I have had this happen quite a few times, and it happened recently where I don't always know that the team that I'm working with realizes that I have kind of got my heart entangled with them, and you go to a meeting, like a marketing committee meeting, and all of a sudden you just kind of notice that at various times some people come, some people don't. So you're used to maybe not everybody being there. But within the course of a year, you're going to see everybody. But then you start to notice somebody's not there. And then they're not there again, then they're not there again. And then you're at an event and someone's like, you go, hey, what happened to them? And they're like, oh, they quit, or they resigned, or they went to another company. And I'm like, well, when did that happen? And they're like, oh, that was 3 or 4 months ago. And you do, for me, it's almost like I have no way, all I had was their work email or their work phone. I didn't know them outside of work. And I do feel like a loss. I'm not going to lie. Like I think about those people and I'm like, gosh, I should have crossed that barrier just a little bit and said, hey, you matter to me. You know, these 10 years we worked together meant something. And I guess in a way, I'll be honest with you, that's partly why I want to talk to you, because I do want you to know, like, I think about you outside of work. You know, I don't think about George Swift just when I get an email from George Swift or a text from George Swift
saying I need some creative work done now. That's when you normally hear from me. I'm in trouble. Okay, call Oran.
Well, hey, that's actually, you know what? I'm gonna tell you something. I tell Michelle this all the time. I said, you know, I kind of pitch us that way, that if you're in a pinch, we are fast enough and we have enough, I think, experience and maybe skill. I mean, not to pat ourselves on the back, but if you call, we're going to do our best to get you something that's not going to look like we did it in a day. Right. You know, and that we understand the realities of what that means in communication. You got to get it done and make it look nice. But I mean, you know, yeah, I felt like I needed you to know that, since you just said that about seizing the moment. Yeah, this is kind of my seizing the moment, you know, like, hey, George matters to you, and I know you have a big change coming. And when I got that email, or I don't know where I saw it, maybe it was an email, you had it in the one from the chamber. And I read that thing 4 times and then 5 times, and then I sat with it and I told Michelle, I said, come read this and tell me if I'm reading it wrong. And I said, there's a key word in here that's missing, and that word was retirement. Right. And so I've been to some ribbon cuttings that you were at, and people keep coming up to you going, so you retiring? You retiring? And I'm like, he didn't say he's retiring.
Well, I'm old enough to retire, but one of the things that I can't envision not doing something that I think is meaningful. Yeah. And so I have been at the Alliance 20 years. Wow. And it's time for a new generation to take over. And so many things are happening that are changing. The State Department of Economic Development, they just, of course, with the new administration, a whole new team there. And we've tried to help restructure that in supported legislation to do it, and I think it's going to be a very positive. I think the Alliance is one of the most efficient, and I think we've been very effective, even though not everybody will agree. But you go back and look at the major projects that have occurred here, the big industries, and I mean, we've had about $100 billion in projects. Everybody wants more, but we have got a foundation here that many communities do not have. We have the petrochemical industry. We've got gaming and hospitality. We've got agriculture and forestry. We've got aviation. We've got health care. Pretty diverse. Now, there are some things we don't have. We're not Semi-Valley, and we're not biomedical center like Pennington is in Baton Rouge. But we have things that other areas don't have. We still have a poverty rate of about 18%, which is about the state average. And people say, well, why are we always on the bottom of the list of everything? It's because we are a poor state, probably one of the richest in natural resources, but we have not invested in people. The early childhood education, and I'm talking 2 and 3 and 4 year olds, you've got to start them out because some of these folks come from poverty families that, if they go to school and it's the first time they've seen a book or something like that, I mean, they're starting off behind. But an investment in the early childhood education will pay dividends down the road. It will cut crime. It will increase employment, and everybody will have a better life. But we've been reluctant to put our money. Everybody said, well, we support early childhood education. The legislature just cut a lot of money out of early childhood education this past session. Why, I don't know, but that's not the kind of thing you do if you're trying to change. And it's kind of like planting a tree. You're not going to live to see the tree grown, but you got to plant them now. And so early childhood education, I think, is the way to get Louisiana off the bottom. And then we're very fortunate here to have Sewella Technical Community College and McNeese. Not many areas our size have a university and a community college. And whether you want to go into engineering or nursing or education or whatever the field, there are programs here that can help folks. And so we're fortunate to have that. But we've got some struggling public schools, and we've got some very good public schools. So it's not perfect, but again, I think investing in education is the way out, and it's a long-term thing. And sometimes people don't like to do long-term things because they want something now that they can show. We did this, we built this building, we did this. Okay, that's great, we need that too. You got to have a well-rounded program, and I think we have been very weak in Louisiana in funding the early childhood education.
Your brand deserves the best. At Parker Brand Creative Services, we build better brands with creative precision. From graphic design to digital marketing, we think sideways, push forward, and get your brand up. Trust the work, not the pitch. View our extensive galleries at parkerbrandup.com. Do you think that there are just these key pivot points or things that have happened that have led us down that path? Like, are there some hinge things, like hinge moments that you can say, okay, well, this happened and this sent us in a direction, either positive or negative?
I'm not sure. I think it's just we haven't set our priorities on what we need to do, and there have been many efforts to bring programs to the state and restructure, and there were some changes made in the legislature, some good, I think some bad, but that's my opinion.
Sure.
But there have been some changes, and that's good. And so, like with the State Department of Economic Development, they're restructuring that, giving them more flexibility to do things, and so that's a good start.
I think sometimes people on the ground level, the street level, they don't know if it's they don't have the time. I think you said something a second ago that may be the reason for what I'm about to say. I think a lot of people are dealing with what's right in front of them.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like they're so almost in a stranglehold of just survival. I hate to say that, but I mean just getting by and keeping the lights
Absolutely.
on. That being able to plant that seed for a tree, it's the last thing on their mind. They're just like, hey, I got to worry about this week.
Yep.
I got employees to pay. I got to, keep the doors open, and that part is just a struggle. So it's like long term, they may not feel like they have the resources, and that again kind of gets into what this whole facility is about, right? I mean, I feel like that. It's like, hey, a lot of people forget that they have a resource like this, a place they can touch and get that if they're in that survival of the fittest state, to go, hey, there's a place over here that can give you a little bit more wiggle room, kind of teach you how to navigate that a little better.
And you're right. People are busy running their lives, and we elect folks on the local and state and federal level, and we expect them to solve the problems. They sometimes forget to solve the problems, but we elect them. We can't all go to Washington. We can't all go to Baton Rouge. And so we have elected representatives to do the job. And but folks are not voting. And in the last gubernatorial election, it had about a 36% turnout.
I know.
That's running for governor. We had the sheriff's race. We had everything. Now, it was not a presidential race, but it was the governor, 36%. Governor Landry got elected with 18%. He got 51 or 52% of the 36%.
Yeah.
So he got elected, say, with 18% of the vote. So that's pitiful.
Yeah.
We have had elections here for bond issues and things like that. You have 5% turnout or 10% turnout.
Yeah.
I mean, people have quit voting. And again, I came from Selma where people were beaten and killed to get the right to vote. And I don't care whether you're white or black or whatever. You need to vote. And think of all the folks that have given their lives so we can vote.
Yeah.
And sit at home. And that is something that just gets me going. Why people will not go vote. And they'll say, well, I was busy, I forgot, went hunting, or it don't do any good. I voted for people and they didn't do what I wanted them to do, and so I'm not going to vote again. Well, that's just fueling the fire and making matters worse. So that's why people say, I'm old enough I can vote by mail, and I'm in a wheelchair, so I take advantage of that. I can get the mail ballot come, and I mean, you sign it, your wife witnesses it, mail it back in. I mean, why couldn't everybody get that?
Yeah,
and you
make it
say,
easier.
well, they'll steal it. Well, you got to have an affidavit, unless you get about 100 people together and say, okay, we're going to throw this thing. I mean, it could happen, but the convenience, I think, would be well worth it and give people the opportunity. Because, again, people work. My son works at Citco. He may be working the overnight shift or whatever, that particular day, but he can vote. They now have early voting, which is good, so they can go vote early. And that's something that we need to really pound people about, because a 30 or 40% turnout or a 10% turnout is pitiful. And people say, well, the bond issue, we don't even know what that means. Well, it means your tax money is going to be utilized for 30 years, and you might ought to look into it.
Yeah. And then the sentiments that your vote doesn't matter or that your vote doesn't count. I mean, you're hitting on it right there. You're willing to allow 30% of the people to make 100% of the decision.
Yeah.
And then you're going to complain about how things are in the state or the country. And it's like, when you have a fraction of the people, and those are the people who care. And sometimes people who care, I hate to say this, those are the fired up people. Mm-hmm. They might be mad. And when you're voting when you're mad, you're not always voting with a clear mind. You might vote for the wrong person just out of spite. Mm-hmm. Or the wrong thing just out of spite.
Yeah.
Instead of just like a good, even-minded, sensible, reasonable voter pool. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I've known several people, and there have been several instances where people were elected with one vote, or 10 or 12 votes separated the people. And the next day you go around and, hey, Oran, did you vote? Oh, I got busy. I forgot to vote. Okay, I lost by one vote. If you and your wife had gone, I would have won. Those things happen. So your vote does count, and particularly with fewer people voting, it actually counts more.
Yeah.
Than if 99% of the people were voting. So anyway, I just think that's something we need to work on. And
what do you think it would take, though? I mean, you did say, that having that easier access and making it more convenient. I mean,
I think something like that would help, because again, people are busy, they're working. You can find an excuse not to do anything, or you can find a way to do anything. Either way. but I just think it more access. But the early voting is a good first start. It gives you several days to go. So if you're going to be out of town on election day and all that kind of stuff, I think that's a good first start.
At Parker Brand Creative Services, we work diligently to build better brands. From award-winning graphic design to media placement, we deliver results that speak for themselves. Are you ready to elevate your brand? Visit parkerbrandup.com today. What do you think, with somebody coming in to take your role? I mean, what do you think that the traits are good character traits or good professional traits they should be looking for?
Well, that will be up to the search committee to determine that. But, it would be hard to say everything that needs to happen. But first of all, you want somebody with an interest in the area that wants to be here and wants to try to make things happen. And, there are a lot of other things, experience and economic development and all of that. So those kind of things. But again, I think it goes back to would somebody really want to be here and care and do those things that need to be done.
Yeah, you had the right chemistry for that. I mean, the one thing I listened to you say today that I really touches my heart is, and I think it probably maybe has a lot to do with why you're good at this too, is what you taught about your dad. You probably have a soft spot in your heart for people who start businesses.
Yep.
I mean, that would be me too. My dad was a small business owner.
And a lot of them fail. You can, people open businesses, they fail, they start again, that one fails, and you think, well, what's going to happen? And then you have somebody like Chris Moe came along with the waiter idea and the app, and it was started here at the Seed Center, and they sold it for $308 million. Now, since then, Waiter has gone out of business and all that, but that's a whole nother issue. But while they were here, I mean, as a startup, it was one of the most successful stories out of a business incubator in the country. So, but not everything he touched worked. He was, I think he'll tell you, he was broke and didn't know what to do or something like that. But he was not coming in from success, but he had the idea and he put it together and made it successful. And now he's a great entrepreneur, and he's got another venture that he's working on. And so you never know, but you can't give up.
That's what I was just thinking. Listen, that's one thing that Michelle and I talk about quite a bit, is like the tenacity to continue even when it gets hard, even when the money's upside down, or you're not sure where it's coming from, or you're waiting to get paid on something to get something else going. Learning to survive through those times when it's rough, and holding on and honing your skills and maybe thinking of new avenues that you can take with the existing skill set, or learn something new, that is something special, because a lot of people do quit. I mean, it gets hard. I hate to say this, but I mean, I do sometimes find myself when I see a new business open, I find my mind analyzing it from a branding perspective and even from just a business perspective, and going, I just don't know. Is that the right place? Is it the right business? Will it make it? Will it be here in a year? And a lot of them aren't, But the ones that stick around, you can tell it's got something to do with the leadership. There's something special about that owner or that person that's behind it. It's not just money. Money can make it easier, but there's something going on with that person where they're working it. And I find that to be a beautiful kind of special thing.
Yeah. And we call it character building when you have a lot of failures, and you have to keep going and get back up and go. So you're right. Starting a business and operating one, especially a small business, is not easy. And then major industries, that's not easy either. So, I mean, Scott Peck in his book, the first line is, life is hard. Okay, life is hard. And once you accept that, okay, we can move forward. It's not going to always be easy. It's not going to end up like you think it would be.
Yeah.
And so I've enjoyed being at the Alliance. I think we've got a pretty good track record, but it's time to move on, and that's what I'm doing. And you're right, I did not say I was going to retire. I'm going to find something else to do and keep moving as long as I can.
That's what I hope to hear. Yeah, well, whatever you do and whatever it is, I hope you'll consider me, yes, a professional acquaintance, but also a friend.
Well, I do, and I appreciate your. I know you started with another company when I first met you, and then you started on your own. But your creativity is always excellent, and we have utilized your company for our economic development advertising. And again, sometimes I've given you a little time to work on it, but a lot of times I'm in a bind and I need something Friday. Oh, it's Friday. Okay. This Friday, not next Friday. And you've always come through, and I appreciate that, because a lot of people you deal with, unfortunately, they don't deliver, and you have to keep on them and those kind of businesses don't seem to do too well. You got to keep keep delivering, and look, everybody messes up.
Sure.
Not that you've ever made a mistake.
Well, we have. We've made some mistakes.
When you mess up, you can fix it quickly and move on, and try not to dwell on what went wrong, but what went right and how we can move forward.
Yeah. One thing I have like a whole little list of things, I guess little personal things over the years that I tell myself. And one thing that I try to remind myself to do is stand in my customer's line. And I know that seems like an oversimplification, but I'm like, how many businesses or CEOs or whatever that I'm working with, I'm like, have you actually went through your customer's experience? And that for me is huge. Like for me, I working in a deadline-based business, not knowing if the person I've communicated with has read my message, if they're doing what I asked them to do, is critical. It's a logistical thing. And so when I don't know that, it can be very, very frustrating. It can make a project harder. It can make me not be able to do what I need to do for my client. So I try to remember that. So when I get a communication and somebody's like, as you and I communicate, it's like, hey, Oran, can you give me a call? I know you need me to do something. If I just ignored that or just go, well, I'll get to that later, I'm just not that way. I go, hey, what would I want? Because he probably needs something, so I'll call you back. You know, or I say, hey, when's a good time? That's the smallest thing. And I'll tell you, so many jobs we've gotten weren't because we're the best. We're not. They'll say, you're the only one that replied. You're the only one that called me back. And I was like, really? Like, that shocks me.
Yeah.
But they'll say, like, you're the only one that submitted a proposal. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, how many people did you contact? Well, we contacted everybody. We contacted people out of the area, and they said, okay, we got it, but we never get the proposal. And I'm like, well, I think it's just not important. Maybe they're making too much money.
Yeah, they must be doing very well.
Maybe they're making too much money. I'm like, okay,
well, that creates more opportunity.
Yeah, it's smaller work sometimes, but I'm willing to take the mortar, over the brick sometimes to make it,
And I'm happy, I know it.
Hi there, Good News listeners. It's time for Fishing for Goodies, where I take a back seat and let the Good News Fishbowl lead the way. Find the Good News podcast is a personal labor of love using the professional skills and resources of Parker Brand Creative Services. When you share our podcast, you're helping our brand, parkerbrandup.com, reach potential clients. When we're building brands, that helps keep the Good News signal strong. So listen, enjoy, learn, like, and share the good news. Now, let's fish out some good questions for my guest.
All right, man. So this is the last part of the show, and it's kind of the fun part. I'll stop talking, and you see that fishbowl sitting right there. You just dig in there. There's 400 different cards and papers and things like that. You pick 3, and then you choose 3, and then you get to read them and pick which one you think you want to talk about. Hey, some people want to do all 3.
All right. Would you rather be poor all your life or have a lot of money and then lose it? That's a good one. Well, I think I would like to have a lot of money
and then lose it,
and at least have a good time for a while. Okay, all right.
That's pretty good.
I've been poor, so I would try the other way. Would you rather find true love or find $10 million? Okay. Is my wife listening? Okay, I'll take the $10 million at this point. All right, here's one. Live as a black man in the southern United States in the 1800s, or live as a woman in Afghanistan today?
Wow, what a question.
Thank you for that nice question. I was raised in an area where I observed what happened in the Civil War and pre-Civil War, and a very poor African-American population. And, that's a bad chapter in the history of the United States. And, we're suffering from it today. And I don't know how you ever overcome that. But there was just a time that was so bad, you can't just ignore it.
Yeah.
And one of the stories that I just found out recently, in the last maybe 10 years, in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, they had an area they called the Black Wall Street. They had African-American entrepreneurs. They had hotels, restaurants, and it was doing very well. And there was some racial incident that a young black was accused of in an elevator with a young white woman, and I don't know what the thing with him. They had all the white folks came, and they said, we're going to go burn. And then in 48 hours, they had burned the whole area down. And there are things like that happened in Louisiana and other places. How do you overcome that? And, so you got to deal with it and talk about it and try to live through it. But I think coming from where I did in rural Alabama with a lot of black folks, you realize the impact that it had on black lives. And then you see success stories like the congresswoman from Selma is Terry Sewell. She went to Princeton and Yale, and her mother and father were educators. And she came out of an environment where she had a stable home life and professional parents, but look where she's gone. She's in Congress. And so that there are success stories, but that's one in a million,
Yeah.
So we got a lot of things to deal with. And again, it goes back to poverty, helping folks get some skills so they can get a job. It doesn't have to be the last job they ever have, but get in the workforce and start being able to provide for yourself and your family if you have one, and try to break that cycle. That's a challenge that I haven't figured out how we do that yet.
George, through this whole conversation we've had today, I can tell in certain moments that something just moves you when you talk about people rising out of adversity. Is that accurate? Because it really seems like I can see your heart just like fills up when you talk about people like that.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
You got me.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. That's a special thing. This world wants us to all be kind of sanitized and professional and never crack and get it done. And I agree. Sometimes we have to be, hard-headed and, push through. It's fantastic to be able to do that. But I also think it's beautiful, and I think it's strength to be able to allow your heart to fill up and use it, and feel that. And I just want to tell you, I see it, and it's really special to me. Appreciate this time,
Thank
brother.
you. All right. Good luck to you.
Same to you.
I'm more thankful every moment that I found.
Thanks for listening to another Good News Conversation. If you'd like to learn more about my guests and their good works, visit findthegood.news or visit the links in the show notes. If you found something good in this episode, please subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave an honest review. These small actions help amplify the good news and help us reach far beyond the Louisiana Gulf Coast. I thank you for pressing play and for syncing up with this good news signal.